Gerald Thompson, a 68-year-old retired mechanical engineer, had spent the last 7 years meticulously restoring his 1967 Shelby GT 500. The car wasn't just any classic vehicle. It was the exact model and color his father had owned when Gerald was a child. Night mist blue with Wimbledon white racing stripes. Those summer evenings watching his father tinker under the hood had shaped Gerald's entire life path, guiding him toward engineering and a lifelong passion for automotive mechanics. After his father passed away from cancer 15 years ago, Gerald had made a promise at the funeral. Someday he would find and restore his dad's dream car. It had taken him nearly 8 years of searching, scouring classified ads, attending car shows, and networking with collectors across the country. Finally, in a barn outside Tulsa, Oklahoma, he found one in salvageable condition. The owner, an elderly widow, had kept her husband's project car covered for decades after he too had passed away before completing the restoration. "My Harold would have wanted someone who cares to have it," she told Gerald, accepting far less than market value after hearing about the connection to his father. The day the Flab delivered the rusted shell to his driveway had been emotional. His neighbors had gathered, curious about the commotion, only to see a grown man with tears streaming down his face as he circled what looked to them like junk. But Gerald saw potential and a connection to the past. Through countless hours of research, networking with parts specialists, and painstaking labor, he had transformed that rusted shell into a gleaming masterpiece. Every Saturday and Sunday for 7 years, he had disappeared into his garage, emerging only for meals and the occasional social obligation. His wife Elizabeth had supported him even when the parts began overtaking their guest bedroom, understanding that this was more than a hobby. It was a tribute. The restoration became both more urgent and more meaningful after Elizabeth's passing. The car represented not just his father now, but a link to his own past, to weekend afternoons when Elizabeth would bring him iced tea in the garage and sit watching him work, reading her mystery novels and occasionally handing him tools. The finished Shelby was immaculate, with period-correct everything, down to the factory specification hose clamps and proper inspection stamps on the undercarriage. Gerald had documented every step of the restoration, creating binders full of photographs, receipts, and historical research. His attention to detail had caught the attention of automotive historians and museum curators who had seen the car at a regional classic car show last summer. The National Automotive Heritage Museum had contacted him 3 weeks ago about featuring the car in their upcoming American Classics exhibition. Gerald had agreed instantly, feeling a swell of pride that his father's legacy would be preserved in such a prestigious institution. The museum was scheduled to pick up the car in 2 days, and Gerald had spent the morning polishing the already gleaming paint one final time, his reflection smiling back at him from the curved fender, though he couldn't help but think the smile looked remarkably like his father's. After Elizabeth's passing 3 years ago, Gerald's 4-bedroom colonial in rural Pennsylvania had felt cavernous. Too many empty rooms filled with memories and too many maintenance issues for a man approaching 70. His daughter, Caroline, a pediatrician in Tampa, had been gently suggesting for months that he consider relocating closer to her family. "Dad, Jason and the kids barely know you," she'd said during her last visit, referring to her husband and 2 children, Emma and Tyler, aged 10 and 8. "And that roof isn't going to fix itself." Gerald had resisted initially. How could he leave the home where he and Elizabeth had raised their daughter? The garage where he'd restored to Shelby? The neighbors who checked in on him with casseroles and invitations to barbecues? But when the Millers next door sold their house to a young family with 3 boisterous children and a dog that barked incessantly, Gerald found himself reconsidering. Caroline had sent him brochures for Sunny Pines, a retirement community just 20 minutes from her home in Florida. The glossy pages showcased smiling seniors playing pickleball, fishing in a well-stocked pond, and working on crafts in an impressive workshop. They even have a classic car club, Dad, Caroline had pointed out during their weekly video call. And every unit has its own garage. The garage had been the deciding factor. When Gerald learned that Sunny Pines offered units with extended garages for residents with special automotive interests, he called the sales office the next day. 3 months later, after a whirlwind of real estate transactions and packing, Gerald found himself the owner of Villa 137 in Sunny Pines retirement community, featuring 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and an extended garage with special wiring for automotive work. The planned community offered other amenities that appealed to him beyond the garage: a fully equipped workshop where he could tinker with small projects, a library with an extensive collection of automotive books and magazines, and most importantly, plenty of other retirees who potentially shared his interests. The sales representative had specifically mentioned 3 other residents who owned classic cars and suggested they might form a bond. Gerald had read through the Homeowners Association agreement, focusing mainly on the sections about garage usage and vehicle storage. Section 7 outlined rules about keeping the community aesthetic harmonious, and subsection 7.3 mentioned something about operational vehicles, but the wording seemed to apply to junkers abandoned on the street. His Shelby, garage kept and in pristine condition, surely wouldn't be a problem. Everything seemed in order. The move itself had been exhausting. Caroline and Jason had helped for the first weekend, but their busy schedules meant Gerald was largely on his own, methodically unpacking boxes labeled by his daughter in her precise handwriting. He had prioritized setting up his bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen, leaving dozens of boxes stacked in the second bedroom and living room. The Shelby arrived 2 days after Gerald, delivered by the same specialty transport company he'd used for years. The driver, a man named Hank who had transported the car to 3 different shows in the past, whistled appreciatively as they unloaded it into the Sunny Pines garage. "She looks even better than last time, Mr. Thompson," Hank had said, running his hand reverently along the fender. "This place got any idea what kind of treasure they got moving in?" Gerald had chuckled, feeling a sense of belonging for the first time since arriving in Florida. He was still unpacking boxes 2 weeks later when the museum called to finalize arrangements for the exhibition, confirming they would send their specialized transport vehicle on Thursday morning to collect the Shelby. On Tuesday morning, Gerald woke early, his body still on Pennsylvania time despite 2 weeks in Florida. The digital clock on his nightstand read 5:47 a.m., but he felt refreshed and eager to start the day. Tomorrow, the museum representatives would arrive to collect the Shelby, and he wanted to give it one last polish, one final inspection before it went on display for thousands to admire. He shuffled to the kitchen in his navy terrycloth bathrobe and leather slippers, a Father's Day gift from Caroline years ago, and set about making his morning coffee. While the coffee maker gurgled and hissed, Gerald gazed out the kitchen window at the pink-orange glow of the Florida sunrise. Sunny Pines had delivered on its promise of beautiful mornings at least. Cup in hand, Gerald made his way toward the garage door off the kitchen. He'd left the interior door unlocked, planning this early morning farewell ritual with his car. The knob turned easily in his hand, and as he pushed the door open, he was met with an unusual draft. The garage felt different, more open somehow. When Gerald flicked on the light switch, his coffee mug slipped from his fingers and shattered on the tile floor. His garage door was open to the street, and the space where his beloved Shelby had been parked was completely empty. Coffee pooled around his slippers as he stood frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. No, he whispered, rushing forward as if the car might be hiding in some corner of this single-car garage. His heart hammered in his chest, his breath coming in short gasps. This couldn't be happening. Not to his father's car. Not the day before the museum pickup. Gerald rushed back inside, leaving coffee footprints across the kitchen floor, and fumbled for his cell phone. His fingers trembled as he dialed 911. "Emergency services, what's your emergency?" A calm female voice answered. "My car's been stolen," Gerald said, his voice cracking. "My 1967 Shelby GT 500. It's worth over $200,000. It was in my garage and now it's gone." The dispatcher asked for his address and information, promising to send an officer to take a report. While on hold, waiting for the dispatcher to return to the line, Gerald noticed a white envelope that had been slipped under his front door. It must have arrived while he was sleeping. Setting the phone down on the counter, he crossed to the door and picked up the envelope. The letterhead featured the Sunny Pines HOA logo, a stylized sun rising over a row of identical houses, and Gerald felt a sinking sensation in his stomach as he unfolded the letter. "Notice of vehicle removal," the bold heading proclaimed. The content below informed him that his vehicle had been removed from the premises due to violation of HOA Policy Section 7.3. No non-operational or unregistered vehicles may be stored on community property. Gerald's knees weakened, and he sank onto the nearest unpacked box. They hadn't stolen his car. They'd towed it. The very community he joined had taken his prized possession. The letter continued, explaining that his car had been towed to Lakeside Impound, located at 1437 Commercial Drive, and that he would need to pay a $250 removal fee, plus daily storage costs of $75 to retrieve it. At the bottom was a handwritten note in precise penmanship. "Vehicles without current registration are considered abandoned per community guidelines. Please review your HOA handbook for details." Gerald picked up his phone again, his hand shaking with a mixture of relief and rage. "Sir, are you still there?" the dispatcher asked. "I'm sorry," Gerald replied, his voice tight. "It seems there's been a mistake. My car wasn't stolen. It was towed by my homeowners association." He paused, taking a deep, unsteady breath. "I'll need to cancel the theft report." After ending the call, Gerald sat among his half-unpacked boxes, staring at the violation letter, the reality of the situation slowly sinking in. The museum was expecting the car tomorrow. He had less than 24 hours to navigate the bureaucratic maze of his new community and rescue his father's legacy, from an impound lot where it sat alongside abandoned drunkards and parking violators. Gerald changed into a button-down shirt and khakis, his hands still trembling with anger as he knotted his belt. Even in crisis, the habits of a lifetime wouldn't allow him to appear in public disheveled. He splashed cold water on his face, studying his reflection in the bathroom mirror. Flushed cheeks, red-rimmed eyes, a vein pulsing at his temple. Taking several deep breaths, he gathered the violation letter, his historical vehicle documentation, thankfully kept in his personal accordion file rather than packed away, and his driver's license. By 7:45 a.m., Gerald was standing outside the Sunny Pines HOA office waiting for it to open. The office was housed in a cream-colored stucco building with a terracotta roof that matched all the other structures in the community. A small brass plaque reading, Sunny Pines Homeowners Association, established in 1992, adorned the door. Gerald checked his watch repeatedly until, at precisely 8:00 a.m., a silver-haired woman in a coral pantsuit approached with a ring of keys. "Good morning," she said cheerfully, eyeing Gerald with curiosity. "You must be new here. I'm Marjorie Winters, HOA president. Are you here for welcome materials?" "I'm Gerald Thompson, Villa 137, he replied, his voice tight with restraint. "And I'm here about my car that was towed without my knowledge or consent." Marjorie's smile faltered slightly as she unlocked the door. "Ah, yes. Please come in, Mr. Thompson. I believe I authorized that removal myself." The office was meticulously organized with filing cabinets lining one wall and a large desk dominating the space. Framed photographs of Sunny Pines amenities and community events hung on the walls, alongside framed copies of awards the community had received for landscaping excellence. Gerald remained standing, the violation letter clutched in his now steadier hand. "My car is a fully restored 1967 Shelby GT 500 that's scheduled to be picked up tomorrow morning by the National Automotive Heritage Museum for exhibition. It's not abandoned. It's a museum piece worth over $200,000. Marjorie settled into her high-backed leather chair and offered Gerald a sympathetic but firm look as she gestured for him to sit in one of the visitor chairs. He remained standing. "I understand you're upset, Mr. Thompson," Marjorie said, sliding her reading glasses up her nose and opening a folder with his name on it. "But rules are rules. The car has no current registration or plates, and several residents, 3 to be exact, reported it as an eyesore when you had it unloaded. One used the word junker." "An eyesore?" Gerald's voice cracked, his composure slipping. "That car is the culmination of 7 years of restoration work. It has been featured in Classic Car Monthly and was personally authenticated by Carroll Shelby himself before he passed away. I have all the proper historical vehicle documentation right here." He slapped the folder down on her desk. "Which wasn't displayed on the vehicle," Marjorie countered, not bothering to open his folder, "and wasn't filed with the HOA office as required in Section 12.4 of the agreement you signed. All vehicles of historical significance must be registered with the HOA office, complete with documentation and proof of value." Gerald felt his face flush. He hadn't read that section. In fact, he realized he had skimmed much of the 47-page document, focusing only on the parts he thought pertained to his situation, the garage dimensions and rules about external modifications to his unit. Additionally, Marjorie continued, her French manicured finger tracing down a page of the community bylaws. Section 7.32 specifically states that all vehicles within Sunny Pines must display either current state registration or an approved Sunny Pines historical vehicle permit on the lower left corner of the windshield. Gerald sank slowly into the chair she'd offered earlier, the adrenaline that had carried him through the morning ebbing away, leaving him feeling suddenly every one of his 68 years. Back home, Gerald paced his half-furnished living room, stepping around moving boxes labeled books and Elizabeth things. Through the sliding glass doors, you could see residents walking their small dogs or riding past on golf carts, their lives proceeding normally while his had been appended. The grandfather clock he'd inherited from his father-in-law chimed 10 times, reminding him that precious hours were ticking away. He pulled out his cell phone and called the museum. After navigating an automated menu that seemed designed to prevent human contact, he finally reached Dr. Eleanor Reed, the curator of American transportation history. Dr. Reed speaking came a crisp professional voice. "Dr. Reed, this is Gerald Thompson." He tried to keep his voice steady. "There's been a situation with the Shelby." As Gerald explained the morning's events, the line went silent except for the occasional "I see" or "go on." When he finished, Dr. Reed sighed audibly. "Mr. Thompson, I understand these things happen, but we need that car by tomorrow evening at the latest to prepare it for the exhibition opening." Her tone was understanding but firm. "The entire American Icons section has been designed around your Shelby as the centerpiece. The lighting, the informational displays, even the specially ordered period-appropriate tire stands, they're all in place." Gerald clutched the phone tighter. I promise I'll resolve this today. The car is undamaged, it's just being held at an impound lot. An impound lot, Dr. Reed repeated, her voice conveying what her words did not. Museums didn't get their exhibition pieces from impound lots. We'll need it by 5 p.m. tomorrow at the absolute latest. If we can't get it, we'll have to rearrange the entire showcase. After promising again to resolve the situation, Gerald hung up and immediately called Lakeside Impound. A gruff voice answered on the second ring. Lakeside. Hello, this is Gerald Thompson. My car was towed from Sunny Pines this morning and I need to retrieve it immediately. Classic Shelby, the voice asked. Yeah, we got it. Man, that's some car. Been getting some special treatment, I can tell you that. Boss had us put it in the covered section away from the beaters. Gerald felt momentary relief that his car was being looked after, but that relief evaporated as the attendant continued. To get it out, you'll need the $250 tow fee, $75 for today's storage, valid ID matching the registration, and either current registration or a special permit for historic vehicles. Cash or credit only, no checks. Gerald explained that he had the historic vehicle documentation, but that the car wasn't traditionally registered since it was bound for museum display. Sorry, sir, the attendant replied, unmoved. Rules are rules. Need to see registration or that special permit. Can't release the vehicle without it. After hanging up, Gerald sat heavily on one of the few unpacked chairs. The documents were somewhere in one of dozens of unlabeled boxes, boxes that Caroline had packed in Pennsylvania while he'd been handling the sale paperwork. He brought the most essential documents in his accordion file, but the historic vehicle certification and museum loan paperwork were in a binder he carefully packed somewhere. As Gerald contemplated the mountain of boxes, the doorbell rang. Opening it, he found himself face to face with a tall, silver-haired man in pressed khaki shorts and a polo shirt. Name's Frank Delgado from Villa 142, the man said, extending his hand. Just wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood. Saw your car being loaded on a flat this morning, classic Shelby, right? Beauty. Thought that was strange since you just moved in. Gerald nearly collapsed with relief at finding someone who appreciated cars. Frank, I can't tell you how glad I am to meet you. I'm in a terrible situation. I could use some help. As Gerald invited him in and explained his predicament, Frank's expression darkened. I'm a retired attorney, he said, accepting the cup of coffee Gerald offered. Corporate law mostly, but I know a thing or two about property rights and homeowners associations. Let's find those documents and then we'll deal with Marjorie and her rule book. The next morning, Gerald's eyes burned from lack of sleep. He and Frank had searched until nearly 2 a.m., emptying box after box, creating chaotic piles of belongings throughout the villa. They had finally discovered the binder of documentation wedged between Gerald's vinyl record collection and a box of Elizabeth's handmade Christmas ornaments, items that had no logical reason to be packed together. Gerald showered and dressed meticulously in a pressed blue button-down in his best khakis, then slid the documentation into a leather portfolio that had been a retirement gift from his colleagues at the engineering firm. Frank arrived at 7 sharp, as promised, wearing what Gerald recognized as his court attire, a lightweight gray suit despite the Florida heat, with a pale yellow tie. Ready for battle? Frank asked with a grim smile, handing Gerald a to-go cup of coffee from the community cafe. As I'll ever be, Gerald replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. The museum truck arrives at 5. We're cutting it close. Armed with the proper paperwork and Frank by his side offering quiet legal advice as they drove, Gerald returned to the HOA office. Today, he noticed details he missed in yesterday's rage. The carefully positioned orchids on the reception counter, the framed photographs of Marjorie, various local politicians, the small lettering beneath the HOA logo that read Protecting Property Values since 1992. Marjorie was already at her desk, speaking on the phone while typing on her computer. She held up one finger as they entered, gesturing for them to wait. Gerald noticed her coral nail polish matched yesterday's pantsuit perfectly. Today, she wore teal. When she hung up, she offered a professional smile. Mr. Thompson, back so soon? And with counsel, I see. Neighbor. Actually, Frank corrected smoothly, extending his hand. Frank Delgado, Villa 142. Retired from Hopkins and Delgado in Philadelphia. A flicker of recognition and perhaps concern crossed Marjorie's face at the mention of the prestigious firm. How can I help you gentlemen today? This time, Gerald had come prepared. He laid out the historic vehicle documentation on her desk, alongside printouts of the relevant sections of the HOA agreement that he had highlighted after thoroughly reading it overnight. Frank stood slightly behind him, a silent but imposing presence. Ms. Winters, Gerald began, his voice calm and controlled. I've reviewed the HOA agreement thoroughly, and while I acknowledge I should have registered my vehicle upon arrival, Section 17.2 clearly states that residents must be given written notice of violations and a 72-hour grace period to remedy them before any action is taken. He tapped the highlighted section with his index finger. Marjorie reached for her copy of the bylaws. Additionally, Gerald continued, Section 8.4 specifically exempts vehicles in transit to museums or historical exhibitions from standard registration requirements provided proper documentation exists. Frank stepped forward slightly, and I believe Sunny Pines would want to avoid the negative publicity that might come from impeding a donation to the National Automotive Heritage Museum, especially when the HOA failed to provide proper notice as required by his own bylaws. Marjorie's expression shifted from professional detachment to calculation. She studied the documents before her, particularly the museum loan agreement with the impressive letterhead and official seals. "I see," she said finally. "There appears to have been a misinterpretation of our procedures." After an hour of discussion that included references to precedents and other HOA disputes that Frank casually mentioned, Marjorie agreed to call the impound lot and arrange for the immediate release of the vehicle with all fees waived. She even offered to send a community maintenance worker to assist with transportation. By early afternoon, Gerald and Frank stood in the impound lot inspecting the Shelby for any damage from the towing process. To Gerald's immense relief, the car appeared completely unharmed. The impound lot owner, a burly man named Ray with grease-stained hands and a surprising knowledge of classic cars, had taken special care with it, storing it separately from other towed vehicles in a covered area normally reserved for luxury cars. "You know," Ray said, wiping his hands on a red shop rag as he admired the Shelby's gleaming paint, "my dad had one of these back in the day. Black with gold stripes. Never thought I'd see one in this condition again. She's a real beauty."